Here. Thank you for coming out to our talk with the Dean. Today we have Dr. Schweitzer, who will be here to answer some of your questions about Wayne State and kind of his journey here to Wayne State. Please feel free to turn your cameras on. We'd love to see your beautiful faces. We're going to start with some introductions first to introduce ourselves. We've got a couple M1s here on the call, Ali and Anirudh, and then an M2, Claire, as well as Dean Schweitzer. So first we'll introduce ourselves, then we'll kind of open it up for you all to ask some questions. We'd love for you to ask questions live. Feel free to unmute yourself, or you can throw them in the chat. Please refrain from asking any questions that are super specific to your specific application cycle. This is a time for kind of more broad questions about the school. So we will kick it off and have Dean Schweitzer introduce himself, talk about kind of where he's from, his journey through medicine, and how he came to be at Wayne State.
Yeah. Thank you, Maddie. And thank you, all potential warriors. We're really excited about the school, and we want to share that excitement with you. And we thank you for your interest in our school. You are what make our school, or you and will be in the future what make your school. I've been around a few different places, and as you can tell from my accent, after about 90 seconds, you can tell where I'm from originally. And I was on a plane in Canada once, and I was working in Canada for 5 years. And I'm talking to this woman on the plane, and she explains to me she worked in the United Arab Emirates for several years, and we spoke about that. And she had spoken to me for about 45 minutes at this point, and she goes, "Have you ever been an expatriate?" And I'm thinking, do you hear my accent? Do you think I'm Canadian? I grew up in New York. I grew up in kind of a lower working class suburb of New York City. My family members were probably like many of your family members, fairly uneducated. They're bright people, but just didn't have the opportunities. And nor did I really have the opportunity. And if you ask me why I came here, is the first reason is I believe so much in public medical education. If it wasn't for public universities, I would not only not be a physician, I would unlikely to be a college graduate. My entire, this is gonna, I'm gonna get slings and arrows about this, but without financial aid, but with just scholarships. And not because I got so many scholarships, but because the public schools that I went to were basically free. My entire medical school and undergraduate was $11,000 back from 1980 to 1986. And the first thing that drew me to Wayne was a belief in the importance of public medical education and the important role it serves in society. And the second reason I came to Wayne is the mission of Wayne, to treat patients who wouldn't ordinarily be treated by other physicians, and to train students who we're providing an opportunity to, who other schools may not provide that opportunity because maybe they're less holistic, maybe they're somewhat more biased, or maybe they just have different expectations. One of the great tragedies of America today is the major predictor of what you do in life is the zip code you're born in. And that is such a depressing statistic. But we're going to be positive. So my specialty is radiology, diagnostic radiology. I still practice radiology every week. I think it's important for a dean to actually practice medicine. I know the vast majority of deans do not. I think it's important for two reasons. You think like a doctor, and other people believe you think like a doctor and hence treat you differently. So I do my clinical work at Ford. I did it yesterday. And I sit there, I make a point of getting there earlier than anyone else and working, I hope, harder than anyone else, because I don't want anyone to ever think that they're just indulging the dean. I want to be like any other individual working in that institution. Since I've been to Wayne, I've been really, really impressed by any number of things. And the first word that comes to mind is the dedication, the engagement, and the connectedness of everyone. Um, I think our students are, if not born leaders, have developed into leaders before they come here. And they are engaged, they are participatory, and their feelings and opinions are valued and have an important part of how the school progresses over time. Our alumni are unbelievably dedicated. And because Wayne is the largest medical school in the country and has been for roughly 100 years, we have many, many alumni. And the reason why our clinical placements are going to work so well now and in the future, and most of it is because those alumni want to give back to the school. The other thing is diversity. You know, the first year Wayne was a medical school. We had the first African American medical student in the state of Michigan before the Civil War, or during the Civil War, before the end of the Civil War. So we've been inclusive and diverse for as long as we've been a school. And one of our partners, when I asked him why he chose to affiliate with Wayne for the clinical activities, said to me, Mark, I'll tell you a story. I'm a osteopathic physician. I'm a DO. And I was applying for fellowships 40 years ago. And there was only one fellowship in the country that would consider DOs equal to MDs, and that was Wayne. And Wayne changed my life because they were open-minded and inclusive. And I've been waiting 40 years to give back for that. And now is my chance to give back. So Wayne has always been inclusive, however you define inclusive, and the definition changes over time. But I just love that story because it just tells you that this is in our DNA. This is not a flash in a pan. It's what we've always done since we started 152 years ago. And I love the sense of mission. You know, our clinical faculty can work in many other places, and to be honest, almost everywhere make more money. And they come here and work here because the patients that they treat and how important that is for them, and how they go home at night believing that they've done God's work, and they have done God's work. And they stay here because that's why they believe they were put on earth. And so Wayne is not school X or school Y or school Z that has a very wealthy patient population that any one of 100 doctors could serve successfully. We are Detroit. We are inner ring suburbs. We are underserved patients. That's our mission. And to be honest, if you want, you know, perfect medical environment with everything being spotlessly clean, with the patients who are always going to be able to understand physician instructions and have the resources to follow those instructions, and that's the type of environment that you like and you thrive in, this is not the school. This is the school where you want to make a difference, where you feel you were put on earth to do something different than 99% of medical students do. And that's what drew me to Wayne. That's been what I've been most enthused about when speaking to our community. And that's our DNA, and I think is always going to be our DNA. You know, we are expanding our clinical footprint, and that's really, really important. But every place we're expanding to has that same need and basically the same socioeconomics, although perhaps in a different location. I don't think we should ever go to a hospital in one of the more affluent suburbs of Detroit. That's a role that other medical schools serve. That's not the role that we serve. So I'm from New York with no R in New York. I came to Wayne because I believe in its mission. I said I'm a radiologist, but to me, that's unimportant at this time. The only nice thing about radiology is you know a little bit about all different parts of medicine, because orthopedic surgeons send films and infectious disease, and you don't know a lot about different fields, but you know a little bit about different fields. Yeah, I said before that, I'm the first one in my family ever to be a doctor. I never met a physician until my second year of college, other than as a patient. But my wife's family is all full of physicians. Her father, in fact, was a physician. And so all her cousins and her brother is a doctor as well. But when they have a medical problem, they always call me. And they don't call me because I'm any smarter than anyone else in the family, because I'm not. But they call me because as a radiologist, you have a little bit broader breadth of medicine. So her cousin's a dermatologist, what does he know if someone has got GI problems? And her brother is an ophthalmologist, and what is he gonna know about prostate cancer, et cetera, et cetera. So although I'm a radiologist, I think the nice thing about being a radiologist is not that I'm a radiologist, is that as a medical school dean, you know a little bit about different aspects of medicine. So mostly I wanted this, and it was planned for it to be interactive. I spent all day long talking, so I'd rather listen than talk. So Maddie is going to MC us. So go ahead, Maddie, take it away.
All right. I'd love to open it up to our prospective students. If anyone has a question they'd like to ask the dean. If not, I've got some questions prepared. So feel free to unmute yourself.
We did not prepare the questions. I did not prepare them.
We didn't prepare. They're your questions that you sent in. So feel free to ask them out loud if you want.
Dr. Schweitzer, if I may ask a question?
Sure.
First of all, thank you for a really inspiring and amazing story. I mean, it was just so pleasant for me to hear about your journey to medicine and journey to become a dean at Wayne. The question I want to ask you, Dr. Schweitzer, is how have you seen the mission of Wayne really reflect in the trajectories that the students take after their career or after their time in medical school? Like maybe it's the residencies that they choose, maybe it's their careers as attendings or stuff similar to this. So how would you say the trajectories have really reflected the mission of Wayne in the students and the alumni?
That's an excellent question. And I'll go back and ask a rhetorical question back. To me, it's not as important what residency you go to or what specialty you pick, but what you do with that. And I said earlier, I gave this anecdote about working in Canada, and Canada had this profound effect on me. And one lesson I learned in Canada is American physicians think about a patient. Canadian physicians think about patients. And I think Wayne students are like Canadian physicians. They're trained to think about patients, both globally in terms of resource distribution, but more importantly, holistically, what environment is that person in? What do I need to do now versus what could wait in a person who has more resources available to them? And one of my firm beliefs is that Wayne students should be leaders. They're warriors, and warriors are leaders. And we just started a week ago this new leadership curriculum called the Trailblazer, which I have. It's really, really exciting. So it's going to teach you about health economics, about legal aspects, but most importantly, it's going to teach you all the skills to be a leader, but through role models. So we've specifically brought in individuals who've had what I call a wobble of a life direction. They don't, their parents don't decide when they're an infant what they're going to do till their retirement. They've done something here, something there, and eventually they found their way. And by having these guest speakers teach you about being a leader and knowing their life experience and their sense of diversity, I think is really important, because you learn both the facts as well as the environment. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Schweitzer. That was an excellent answer. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Andrew. Okay, next.
Dean Schweitzer, my name is Sarah, and I'd love to ask you a question. Again, thank you both for the introduction and for holding this chat. So also Canadian here. So I love the I love the favorable view of Canadians. And so my question for you is, do screeners read updates?
I'll have the admissions or answer that. But I love Canadians, and I think everything is positive about Canada, except for two things. I'll give you my two criticisms. They assume Americans are dishonest. And it was so hard for me because I would be presenting stuff and you'd have to prove to people once you started that what you were saying was the truth and was ethical, because their assumption is, at least where I was in Ottawa, was that Americans are less principled than Canadians. And I don't want to touch that third rail. And the second thing is, I love hockey, but the love of hockey was just overwhelming. Every little town, I worked in a bunch of small little hospitals in these little towns. There were 1,000 people who had a hockey rink. And my favorite survey was of Canadian mothers. And 90% of Canadian mothers would rather their child, son or daughter, play one game in the NHL than be a neurosurgeon. And that's my favorite survey question. But can our admission staff please answer Sarah's question about additional information?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Sarah. My name is Abhi. I'm the Associate Director of Admissions here at our medical school. I'd like to start off by saying I did marry a Canadian. So, I mean, I do love Canadians as well. But that being said, I think it's a great question. Most of the updates that you end up selecting to us, if not all of them, are reviewed by our admissions staff. So we have application readers that review from a very peripheral standpoint, applications as they end up coming through. So as you begin to send forward additional updates, our admission staff will be reviewing them along with our admissions committee as well.
Thank you, Abhi, and thank you, Dean Schweitzer. And before I let off to the next question, just wanted to say that the feeling of love is mutual. I lived in Cleveland for a couple of years, so I love Americans too.
What part of Canada are you from, Sarah?
Oh, I'm from Toronto.
But no R between the T, no is O between the T and the R.
Well,
Wow.
the T, the last T is not pronounced. It's Toronto. It's not Toronto. That's how you know.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Next question, please.
Hi there, my name's Miranda. I was just curious, I know one of the really great things about Wayne is the size of the community, but within that, I was kind of wondering, how does the program help to facilitate more close relationships with students and relationships between students and faculty?
Yeah, that was really one of my concerns too. I agree with you. And my high school had, we have roughly 300 kids per class. My high school had 300 kids in a class. And I thought to myself, I knew every single kid in the high school. But it's not the fact that I knew every single kid in high school. I lived in a small town and I knew every kid from kindergarten through high school. And it's over the course of those 18 years or 16 years that you begin to know them. So I saw that as an issue. So we have learning communities, and that learning community becomes your social support and academic support mechanism. But we're transitioning to a model where 40 or so kids have one clinical campus assigned to them. And you start working in that clinical campus from roughly month 1 of medical school. And you're with those same 40 kids throughout all 4 years of medical school. And they will be your social support mechanism. They will be your academic support mechanism, and they will be your friends for life. Because I think it's important to have that small group collegiality, because, in the military, you fight for your buddy, you don't fight for the general. And we want you to fight for your buddy, and you need buddies to fight for. But I also want you to feel a sense of connection to your entire class. It's a balancing act. So we spoke earlier about this leadership program, the Trailblazer program, and then a whole class gets together once a month. Hopefully when we normalize in 6 to 9 months from now. And the secondary purpose of that, three purposes, to teach you leadership skills, to show you role models for what you can do, And thirdly, to give you more cohesion with the class, particularly when you're going to be at your clinical sites and not see your class for tests and everything else. So I think that's a reasonable balance between the small cohesive group and a sense of overall community. But I am a flexible guy, and what works, works, and what doesn't work will change.
I'd love if one of our student panelists could talk about
Yeah.
our learning communities and our anatomy groups, just for that student perspective as well.
Yeah, I can
Well
talk.
done, MC.
I can talk about that a little bit. So I'm actually a learning community coordinator, and so basically, learning communities are groups of anatomy tables that happen to be, right next to each other in lab. That span across all 4 years, and you end up getting really close to your anatomy table specifically, just because gross anatomy lab is really hard. I'm sure Maddie can attest to that. Maddie and I are in the same anatomy table, but basically in your learning community, you have like students from all 4 years, and you also have faculty mentors, and it's a really good opportunity for not only academic support, but also social events and things like that. And it's not restricted to just within your learning community as well. There are other events where like learning communities can like have social events or competitions like between each other and things like that. So yeah, I was pleasantly surprised at how such a big school can also like feel like a really tight community. And I really like that about Wayne.
Yeah, and I want to put in a plug for anatomy too. I had different opinions about anatomy when I came. And Wayne arguably has one of the best anatomy courses and curriculums and education in the country. And to tell you about how Wayne is intimate with our community, how we are of Detroit and in Detroit, is the Body Bequest program. So for 50 years, we've had body bequests from the community. And Wayne is so well respected in the community that we have many, many more bodies than actually we need for anatomy. And we provide it to other dental schools and nursing schools, et cetera. And then once a year, we have a very evocative ceremony with the family members who had donated their loved one for medical come, and the students give short speeches about it. And it is a funeral in every sense of the word. And I was really deeply, deeply affected by it. And one woman comes up to me and, I tear up even thinking about it. And she said, I really had no idea what I was doing when I signed this form. But I realized that I did something really good. And I'm proud of my mom for allowing us to do this really good thing. It just, anatomy teaches you a lot. And this having that small anatomy table teaches you the connectedness. Okay, on that up note, let's get to next question.
Hi, Dean Schweitzer. How are you?
Hi, Ashley.
Hi, everyone. How are you guys doing today?
We're doing dandy. I'm using
So
a Joe
I'm
Biden word for the inauguration.
We're all waiting patiently. So I'm a current student, a current applicant for this cycle. And my question to you is, I would really love to know your vision for Wayne in the next 5 years.
Yeah, so Wayne should do 3 things in the next 5 years. We should be judged even better than we're judged now. And so I would say be a top 30 medical school within the next 5 to 8 years. We should create leaders, because again, deeply affected by Canada. Physicians should be leading healthcare, or health professionals, I should say. I shouldn't always say physicians. But MBAs and business people should not be leading healthcare. So we should give you the skills to become a leader, and however you define leadership being. And the third is to be as diversified as we can be, so that we create the environment for anyone's unique learning style. So if you're interested in rural health, we'll be able to do rural health. If you're interested in environmental medicine, we'll be able to focus you on environmental medicine. If you want to do a dual degree, will allow you to do a dual degree easily. Because the advantage to having a big school is that there's, they say if you're one in a million, there's 100,000 of you in China, right? So if you're one in a million in a large medical school, there'll be a niche for you. And my vision is to make sure that we have the niches for whatever your interest is, whatever your learning style is, whatever type of environment you need to be as successful as you can be. Because our goal is to give you the skills to be as successful as you can be.
Thank you for that answer. I
You're
just
welcome.
have, I have one other follow-up. Can you tell us how have you recently advocated for your students and or your patients?
Well, I'm a practicing physician, so I advocate for my patients every day, I think, by being a good doctor. But I think your question is a little bit different. We'll talk about the vaccines, because I've probably spent an hour every day for the last month working as hard as I can to make sure our students get vaccinated and faculty as quickly as possible. So we've managed, I think at this point, the M3s and the M4s will all be vaccinated, I think, within another few more days. The rising M2s will be vaccinated shortly thereafter. And I've been able to advocate that even all our teaching hospitals, when they, because of shortages of PPE and perception that students don't play as an important role in medical care as they really do, they've removed all these other medical schools, all these other nursing schools, all these other PA schools, but none of our hospitals have removed Wayne students from their clinical rotations. So I was reasonably proud about how, I won't say it was me advocating, it was our administrative team advocating, so that there would be no disruption of education. Now, I'm also responsible, I wear another hat as Vice President for Health Affairs. So I'm responsible for the nursing students, the PA students, and the pharmacy students. And it's interesting, you learn about all different kinds of biases, and there's, professional biases that a nursing student isn't as vital to the team as is a medical student. And that is a bias, like any other bias. And I'm working hard to have them overcome that. But it taught me a lesson that logic and biases don't mix all that well. As Mark Twain said, you can't convince a person of an opinion taken illogically by logic. And so some of these institutions didn't think that the other health professions were as vital to them. And I'll self-criticize, I was less successful in placing them. I found alternatives outside of hospitals, but it was a lesson I learned.
I appreciate your honesty and your transparency on that answer.
Okay, you're welcome, Max.
Dr. Schweitzer, we do have, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, ask your question.
Okay, sorry. So this is just a quick question regarding incoming students to Wayne. I was just wondering, like, how do students apply for scholarships when coming into med school besides applying to FAFSA?
Okay, I'll leave that to your admission staff as well.
So that's a great question as well. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be sending out a weekly news, or a monthly newsletter, I should say. And that's going to give you a lot more information in terms of what scholarships might be available to you before you end up matriculating with us after you get admitted. So that's a great way for you to, not just stay in tune with really what's happening as far as marketing is concerned, in terms of like a lot of the events that we're throwing, especially even the one that we have here today. But it's also going to give you an idea about those scholarships, financial planning, as well as like a lot more financial aid specific information. So that's one way of doing it. The second way is when you actually end up coming to our interview day, we're going to give you a little bit more information about need-based scholarships as well as some merit-based scholarships as well. So that would be the second. And the third one is when you onboard officially. Those are, we kind of titrate like what types of scholarships might best fit you that you automatically are eligible for. And then those that you have to apply for, we also end up delivering that to you as well. So those are the three big ways in which we end up giving you scholarship information.
Sounds good. So if you complete your interview day, then it's best to just look at the newsletter and see what comes up in there.
Mhm.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Good question.
All right,
Hello,
Dean Schweitzer.
Oh, go ahead.
Hi, hello, Dr. Schweitzer. My name is Gerardo. Thank you for sharing your story again. One of the things that you mentioned at the beginning was how you really how does Wayne pride itself for being diverse? I'm wondering if Wayne has any pipeline programs to increase the number of Black and Latino students coming from high school or underserved communities to enter medicine.
We have, I would say, I'm really proud of the pipeline programs. And our pipeline programs start in 6th grade. I gave a talk to a bunch of 6th graders from Detroit Public Schools to expose them to STEM. So we have pipeline programs for middle school students, for high school students. We have the Med Direct, which is a pipeline program from high school to medical school. We have another pipeline program for college students to obtain PhDs, underrepresented minorities, NIH funded. We have another pipeline program for high school students to get more interested in STEM. And we're applying for a large NIH grant called the FIRST Grant for faculty members to increase representation. And our president of the university is underrepresented as well. He is a physician, and he was on the NIH task force to increase underrepresented in medicine. So we start in elementary school, but we can always do better. And I am focused on doing better. And then the next one is this grant for faculty members, because Wayne as a university has a diverse student body. As a medical school, we could do better, but we have a quite diverse student body. But our faculty needs to be more diverse, and our leadership needs to be more diverse. And it's my responsibility to do both of that. I've been involved in 3 chairs since I've been here, and all the chairs I have appointed have been African American, all eminently qualified. And we need to do better with our faculty. But faculty takes a long time, because we don't hire all that many per year. I can say we should be doing better, and we will do better. But I think compared to 99% of the country, we do great.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Geraldo.
Hi, Dean Schweitzer. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I had a question about telemedicine. I know that's something that's very essential in our healthcare delivery system today, especially for underserved populations and generally everyone else with this pandemic and in-person restrictions. So I was wondering if Wayne State University has emphasized telemedicine in its curriculum, practice, and/or clerkships in the recent years, and if not, do you plan for it to become something the institution is considering?
Yeah, so I'll give you, so yes, and yes, but let me explain. So actually, I was the PI on a state of Michigan grant. So the problem with telemedicine for underserved is they may not have access to a computer and/or internet. So it actually may put them at a disadvantage. So I was PI of, I think it was a $2.4 million grant to provide laptops to underserved in Detroit to allow them to access telemedicine and to allow a lot of their health statuses, people with chronic disease, to be monitored remotely. So we practice what we do. Many of our rotations, particularly psychiatry and neurology, became overwhelmingly telemedicine during a pandemic. So to me, telemedicine is something that you do not learn in a classroom. Just like you can't learn surgery in a classroom, at least learn it effectively. You learn it by doing. Now, the question in the back of my mind is, how much are we going to come back to the steady state? So is it a rubber band or a dish? And the rubber band theory is a stressor comes, and you stress it, and it kind of snaps back to the way it was before. And the dishes, if you stress the dish, it breaks into little pieces, and you got to start from the beginning. I would say it's an old rubber band, in that if you stress it, stretch it, it comes back, but never goes back to its initial shape. It's still a little bit different. So I think we'll be doing more telemedicine. As I said before, I'm a radiologist, and I practice telemedicine every day. When I was in Canada, one of the hospitals I read from was north of the Arctic Circle. It was 1,500 miles away. So I think you'll learn by doing. I do think, I don't want to be archaic, but there's something to be said about the patient-physician in-person encounter. It creates this trust, so that when the patient feels something off, they then share it with the physician. And I do think that that's important. And seeing a patient in a room, how they sit down, how they stand up, do they have a peculiar smell, do they look disheveled, tells you a lot about them. So I believe telemedicine is here to stay. If you wanted me to gamble, I would say about 20% of medical visits will be telemedicine, disproportionately in rural areas. But I think after you have a relationship with a physician, I think once you have that relationship, then a telemedicine. I would hate to think that your first psychiatric evaluation will be done by telemedicine. Your first physical with your family physician will be done by telemedicine. But in the way, it's really advantageous to education, like in psychiatry. Like, a lot of psychiatric patients feel disconcerted when there's 3 people in the room and they're discussing this one-on-one, and that impedes the trust. And when you're doing a telemedicine, it minimizes that. Does that answer in a long-winded kind of way?
Yes, thank you so much for your response.
You're welcome.
Hi, Dean Schweitzer. Thank you for having us here today. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I guess it's interesting. I'm a little bit older, and there's several names here that didn't exist when I was a kid. Madison and Taylor are 2 of them.
Really?
Taylor was someone who fixed your clothes.
That's true. That's understandable.
Okay, sorry, I'm into
That's
names.
okay.
Go ahead, Taylor. Do you play
That's okay.
guitar?
I do, yes. I forgot that was back there. Yep.
Well, what type of music?
I mainly like country. I know that's not hugely popular.
I'm a heavy metal fan. And you get into the Warrens of the internet, and it was this country version of Motley Crue's greatest hits. And
I have not heard that.
and highly entertaining.
Okay.
I suggest you listen to it. It's interesting. I thought it was pretty good. But go ahead, Taylor. What's your question?
I'll look into that. As somebody who's coming from out of state, it's very important to me to be involved with the community in Detroit and get to know the patients I'm possibly serving in the future. So my question is mainly for the student ambassadors that are there. I'm wondering, what are some of your favorite programs that you've had to get involved with the community? Because there's just a lot listed on the website in terms of working with the underserved populations and like the youth populations. But Street Medicine Detroit is one of the ones that stands out to me. I'm wondering if you guys could talk a little bit more about those.
Ambassadors, take it away.
Yeah, I can answer that question. So since we are such a large class, we have a lot of clinical opportunities, especially like as first years, you wouldn't think necessarily that they get that much exposure. But since we have so many student orgs and there is such a big need in Detroit, there are plenty of opportunities. There's Street Med, which is where in the past before they would literally go with like a van or whatever and go provide care directly to people that they could find. There's also a ton of student run free clinics. So I'm a part of CAS Clinic, which is a free clinic, no insurance, like they give prescription meds and they have, you literally treat patients on site. So it's like you get real life experience taking HPI, giving a physical exam, which I think that's really hard to find elsewhere, like especially as a first year. So there's a lot of student run free clinics that do address the patients. And so that's really your first line practice. And there's normally like an overseeing M3 or 4 or overseeing physician to just like give you guidance, or if you like get stuck or have a question, there's definitely people to answer you there. So there's so many different organizations that give you that opportunity, as well as it is built into the curriculum, and especially as like you become an M2 and an M3 and an M4. So
yeah,
definitely student orgs.
And I want to emphasize one point. We've been doing this for 152 years. We're not a flash in the pan. The first student-run clinic in any medical school in America was at Wayne State.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome, Taylor.
Hi, Doctor. I have a quick question, if that's okay. First of all, thank you so much for organizing this. And it's great to meet and ask questions. This is another diversity-related question. So just a bit about me. I'm from the Middle East. I'm from a different country. And I was wondering what percentage of MD students are from different countries, just from the same background?
I'll see if the admissions office has, but because of Wayne State's location, we've historically had many students of Middle Eastern extraction. Among my chairs, I think a quarter of my chairs were born in the Middle East. Does anyone have any? I don't think we break down statistics by that.
So we can't break down statistics by, this is Dawn from admission, sorry. We can't break down statistics by Middle Eastern because unfortunately, there's racial backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds, and Middle Eastern is not one. So because of our nearness to Dearborn, which is obviously the largest, Arab American population in the country, we have a significant number. I think that last year, we can look at birth countries, and last year I think we had, our matriculants came from a little over 30 different birth countries. The majority of them obviously are permanent residents of the United States if they're not citizens of the United States, because we do accept students from who are US citizens, US permanent residents. We accept Canadian citizens, and then we accept any international student who has a degree from Wayne State University. So we're starting to get them. We do have a number of students who are from Kuwait, because we do have a special program with the country of Kuwait. So there will be a number of students. So, our diversity is not just based on the color of skin, and that's what I think is really important to us. Our diversity is based on not only our experiences, but so many of the backgrounds that everybody brings to the table. So we know we've got one guitar player, I'm guessing there are other musicians here, which is why we have the orchestra that we have, which is made up of students and faculty from Wayne State and from all the affiliated hospitals that have they did a wonderful virtual experience. It was really some really phenomenal music. So thank you for the question.
Hi, may I ask the question?
Yes, you go by Maddie? No.
50-50. No, I've been trying to do more Madeline, but Maddie just seems to stick, so yes.
Yes, Madeline.
For the record, I played ice hockey for about 15 years. So the fact that came up in that's the first one for me. So, and I coach here in Ann Arbor. But anyways, we talked a lot about the alumni community, and one of my specific questions with respect to that alumni community is if there are programs set up to connect current med students with alumni with respect to doing clerkships, either in different parts of Michigan or globally, as well as research fellowship opportunities. That's something I'm really interested in. And given it's such a large alumni, being able to take advantage of that when you're networking for those different opportunities. I was wondering if there's programs set up to facilitate that connection.
Well, I'll turn this again a little bit backwards. Basically, wherever you do a clinical clerkship, statistically, an alumni is going to be a supervisor for that, just because there are so many Wayne State graduates. Every hospital in Southeast Michigan is probably disproportionately populated by Wayne State graduates. According to LCME, you have to have formal agreements with places to do clinical rotations. You can do one-off agreements, but you don't need to do that for alumni. We have a very active alumni network. They meet once a month. I speak to them at every meeting. You don't need to do a clerkship to meet them.
Okay.
And they, tend to really love and have a deep affection for Wayne State. It means a lot to them. And the Wayne State graduates all over, whether an alum is thinking about you or someone else, the reputation is, you know how to practice medicine, you know how to get things done, you know how to work in adverse scenarios. You're not a person who learned medicine from a book only.
Right.
And so I would say the greatest strength of of our graduates in terms of the perception is no one doubts for a minute your quality as a clinical doctor. And whenever someone is looking at you as a potential resident fellow or staff member, that's really what they care about.
Definitely, definitely. Okay, good to know. Thank you.
See you, Madeline.
Hi. So I have a quick question. My name is Jenny Durain. I'm speaking to you.
That's Surgeon 46.
Yes. I promised I'd be here to meet you and see you in person. So I'm definitely happy to be here. It's been a difficult year with the pandemic and COVID and everything. So I was wondering if you had one advice for future physicians, the next generation, what will it be?
Resilience. Tell me, if I have to give people two advices, it's resilience and ambition. And I've thought a lot about this because I've been around a while. The people who are most successful in whatever they do, they've always had to overcome some type of adversity. And to be honest, the more adversities that you overcome, the more you're going to change the world. And ultimately, I think we all want to change the world. Did you see the movie, what was it, Unlimited or Limitless with Bradley Cooper and Robert De Niro?
Yes.
Yeah. So in that movie, right, there's this drug that makes them super smart. And so there's this soliloquy that Robert De Niro is saying to the Bradley Cooper character where he says, I don't know what kind of genetic mutation you are. I don't know how smart you are, but you can't know what I know because you haven't been stepped on like I've been stepped on. Now, people remember that soliloquy? And to me, I was affected by that because some people get stepped on in life if you're lucky. And most people perceive that as being unlucky. But it's lucky because it teaches you resilience, because you're ultimately always going to get stepped on. And then the second thing to me is ambition. You are all ambitious, or you wouldn't be applying to medical school at Wayne State. You've all worked hard. You all want to make a difference and want to be successful. But what I've found is people reach that goal that they set for themselves and then stop. They don't set the next goal. And my advice would be wherever you end up going is to always set the next goal. One of my bosses, I'm talking to him, and on his desk is an application for a major position at the university. He didn't want to be chair radiology, and he was chair radiology for a few months and was already thinking about what the next step would be. Now, in a way, that made him always dissatisfied. So it's kind of a balancing act between being proud of what you've accomplished and being ambitious. But if I had to give people two words of advice, is be resilient, and I think that's the Wayne mantra, and be ambitious, and that will be the future Wayne mantra.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I continue the great work.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, my name's Akmal. I'm also Canadian here. Great to see so many Canadians around and all
Where
the
are you
love.
from in Canada, Akmal?
I'm from Guelph, Ontario. I don't know if you know where that is. It's
I know Guelph, Ontario, yeah.
So yeah, it's like 45 minutes outside of Toronto. And I actually live in
Is
New
that where
Jersey now.
was that where Wayne Gretzky was from?
Wait, he was from Kitchener. I lived there too for a long time as well. And so yeah, so Guelph is like we have the veterinary college. That's where everyone goes for vet school. But anyways, I live in New Jersey now, so I have a profound love for Americans now too, which I think like you said, I don't think we all think Americans are dishonest, but there's definitely that bias there. But anyways, I had a question regarding what Wayne State looks for in competitive applicants. So once the stats have been kind of filtered out, what the admissions team looks for clinical experience. And also, I actually toured Wayne State a few years ago, and I very easily noticed that there was just this emphasis on serving the underserved and the marginalized populations. So how can applicants who don't have necessarily a lot of clinical experience demonstrate their role as an advocate and somebody who's willing to go that extra mile for marginalized populations?
I'll let the admissions staff answer that if I can, because as many of you know, and I follow this rule to the fault, dean is never involved in any specific admissions decisions. But go ahead, take it away, your admission staff.
Don, do you want me to take this? So I'll go ahead and do it. So I think that's a fantastic question. And I think that, and that's something that I think like we end up like reviewing on, I would say, a very consistent basis. There's, I would say off the top of my head, 3 things that you can do, and 3 things that we view in terms of clinical experience. And I think the first thing that I'd like to mention is that we look at students being very strong when it comes to clinical experience when they have very longitudinal chronic experiences. We like to see that in terms of what Dr. Schweitzer was mentioning today when it comes to resilience, that it's not something that you just, came up with like in the last like month where you were like, well, I think it's a good idea to become a physician. Now, granted, that's a great that's a great mindset to have, but it's about really showcasing to us the passion and the resolve that you have to really wanting to really fight this road ahead for you and to really be an advocate for your patients. So that's one option or one ability. The second one is to kind of figure out a way in which you can actually go ahead and really delve really deep into learning about, as you just mentioned, underserved communities. We at Wayne State, I would say we're one of the biggest strong points that we have is that we're so heavily steeped in our community. That's one of the biggest selling points that we have. I would say next to our students, the ability to understand our community and the ability to, and I think Dr. Sprague actually says this quite a bit too, where, certainly Detroit is many things, but it's also a place where we do a lot with a little. And certainly that's changing, and that's a paradigm shift that we're going through currently right now, that Detroit is becoming truly an epicenter. With Apple now like actually having like a place here as of like yesterday, an announcement of iOS app development here in the city of Detroit. But how do we go about doing that? So I think that that's the second option that I would strongly suggest for you to take, that you begin to create experiences and clinical opportunities for yourself, and finding those in, I would say, your underserved communities, and knowing how to interact with diverse patient populations is the second option. The third one is intertwining what you like with assisting others in a very clinically oriented fashion. So in terms of, I would say, for instance, medical art and humanities. I would say that that's like one really great example. We've had several applicants that said that I really love enjoying art. And what they've looked at is looking and seeing how that they can actually like take art and showcase humanism and talking about stories and talking about artistic pursuits, and be able to kind of channel that in a way in which you can actually allow for healing. And we actually have a specific student organization that's respective to that, Art in Medicine. So being able to kind of allow for those 3, I would say, will give you a good opportunity and a good feel for knowing how well you can build your skill set and your experience in the clinic, if you will. So I hope that kind of answers your question, Akmal.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. That was a great detailed response. I just have one quick follow-up, if that's okay.
Sure.
So in line with what you just said regarding kind of taking what you like and merging it with trying to get clinical experience, or like you said, taking if you like music, for example, and taking that to maybe like retirement homes and stuff like that. How do you given the pandemic situation, how do students demonstrate their ability to get clinical experience when the traditional clinical experience environment has been changed, where volunteers can no longer come in, and unless you have like a CNA or a certification, you're not able to actually interact with patients the way you would before the pandemic. So how do we continue that sort of chronic ongoing interest in getting clinical experience, or how have you seen other students do that?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So, as you kind of just pointed out, we're hoping that, strong students really have showcased to us that this isn't something that they started to pursue like, just now, right? This is something that before the pandemic, you were also trying to pursue these types of endeavors. But certainly if you are beginning to pursue medicine and you're a new student, how do you go about, getting involved in these types of activities? There's actually a few examples that came up today in this conversation. So one is telehealth. So the ability to like look at, virtual platforms and being able to deliver care, I think that's one good opportunity. There's several students that I've heard of that they've been looking at seeking, like from a mental health perspective, being able to be patient advocates for students. For patients, I should say. That's the second opportunity. The third one is, and you may have all heard this in the news as well, but Wayne State is actually one of the premier institutions in which we've actually delivered COVID-19 response to various members of our community, and it's truly even a framework for deployment strategy for the NIH as well. And there's been various students who, though we don't mandate that they end up volunteering in delivering COVID-19 testing, they've been able to participate in those types of endeavors as well. Being able to do though. And it's not necessarily even just being very clinically oriented. And as Dr. Schweitzer mentioned, it's also about looking at political advocacy. It's also about looking at economics. There's various perspectives and ways in which you can really go about understanding how to be a partner in the deliverance of care to patients. So I think that those are certain ways in which you can do that in a COVID-19 environment. So I hope that kind of gives you a little bit of insight into that and a little bit of help.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that response. Thank you, Abhi, and thank you, Dr. Schweitzer.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so we are coming up to 1 o'clock. So we're gonna ask Dean Schweitzer just one more question, just to kind of wrap this up. What advice would you give to these applicants and future Warrior MDs before we sign off?
Yeah, so I would say that I've been in 4 different medical schools, or 5, depending on how you count it. And Wayne State is unique in its sense of mission, its obligation to the community, and the roll up your sleeves education that it provides. My one life advice to you is I really believe in the wobble theory of creativity and success. That there shouldn't be a straight line from goal 1 to goal 2 to goal 3, that you'll be pushed off of the path and then you'll go back, and you'll be pushed off to the path and you'll find a different path. And that different path was really the one that was intended for you. So be ambitious, but be flexible, and know that what you want and what you might want to do will change over time. And I really think that's what will lead to the most successful person, and the person who uses their skill sets the best possible way. I know you are all talented. I know you will all be successful. And sincerely, as the dean, I appreciate your interest in our school. Talented and bright students are what make this school. And I think we have a great school. I'm really proud of it, and I'm very happy that you're interested in it. And thank you for spending an hour with us.
Thank you so much to everyone for coming today. Thank you, Dean Schweitzer. Best of luck to all of you throughout your application process and your future as physicians. We hope this was informative for you.